Malcolm Hoenlein is with us. We call this the weekly update on Friday mornings here at JM and the AM, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM and the AM.
Thank you. Good to be with you as always.
So is it my imagination or am I right that this is unprecedented, the lack of travel, the lack of the ability to travel on a regular basis back and forth to Israel? What do I mean? Before COVID, Malcolm, and again, tell me if I'm imagining this. Before COVID, am I right that I remember flying twice during the war in the summer of 2014. Am I right? Before COVID, there was no such thing as El Al's Israel's national airline actually, becoming so limited and where it would be so difficult to secure a flight from the United States to Israel and vice versa?
Well, there were occasions where there were limited flights. It's not the first time we've had attacks from Iran and necessitating, protective measures to limit the number of flights. This is already going into week 3 of it, and it's the uncertainty, I think, that is impacting, and also a sort of deadline with Pesach that a lot of people who want to get to Israel or from Israel want to do it of course, in the next 2 weeks. So it puts additional pressure, and there are limited flights. And with the incoming rockets continuing, including one not long ago, it's unpredictable. And there are people who were on planes sitting on the runway, having to get out of the plane even twice, and then the flights get canceled, or the other airlines not flying. It's a combination of factors, so it's not unprecedented, but I think the intensity this time, and because people didn't take the warning seriously before that this was imminent, didn't leave. So my theory, and hear me out for a moment, you are a historian, especially when it comes to modern Jewish history and modern history in general. My theory that if COVID never would have happened, there'd be no precedent where government leaders, including the leaders of Israel, would say to themselves, you know what? People can be in one place. They can Zoom in here and FaceTime in here. We learned that lesson from COVID. Everyone thought that there's no way you can go ahead and suppress an entire population from traveling, but COVID proved we can. So you don't agree with my theory that if not for COVID, it would not be to this degree? What, the ban on travel wouldn't be to this degree?
Yeah.
Look, the ban is not something anybody wants. None of the airlines want it. This is a very profitable route, especially for American Airlines. And, they also have unions that dictate what they do. I do think COVID softened the ground, as you said.
There you go. That's all. I needed some affirmation.
People acclimate to things. The problem here...
I needed validation, Malcolm.
Well, anything you want, just tell me and I'll validate it for you. And I'll stamp your card on the way out.
There you go. So there it is, and that's the current situation. I hate to start on this side of the world, but I think it's appropriate, even though there's so much to talk about regarding the war, Iran, the oil, the loss of U.S. military personnel. There's a lot to talk about, but we got to start what happened yesterday in Michigan. And it's interesting, the Times has an article, and it made me think this morning. I mentioned this to the listeners in the 6 o'clock hour. It made me think that, there are people now in certain synagogues who are proclaiming, and this was the quote from one of the rabbis, we're not Fort Knox. To what degree are we supposed to go to secure our premises? And yesterday, thank God, there were armed security guards in this episode in Michigan. But, Malcolm, it is a good question when rabbis and boards of directors and lay leaders in synagogues sit down to discuss protecting their premises. It's a legitimate question. To what degree do they need to go? What are your thoughts in the aftermath of yesterday?
Well, first of all, I think we have to look at the sort of in a larger context. How many synagogues came under attack yesterday everywhere? In Rotterdam, in Liège, in West Bloomfield. And West Bloomfield is an unusual case. First of all, it's a huge campus.
Toss Toronto in there also, by the way.
and Toronto.
Right.
I was going to come to Toronto separately. 12,000 members. They have the resources to have full-time staff, including armed staff.
Right.
I think it is their staff that shot the guy,
right?
Not the police,
right.
as was reported some places. But as you know, about 15, 20 years ago, we started SCAN to meet this need. And when nobody would listen to us about the security needs, we went to community after community, especially in this area, and they would not take seriously until we started getting grants from the city, state, and federal governments to help cover it. So this is not new. We've had so much warning about this, and we have tried to institute it. We do lone shooter training. We do all sorts of things which have saved lives in numerous cases, including in the Texas synagogue and at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. Both had just gone in the weeks before through the exercise, so they knew what to do when the guy with a gun. I don't know how many shuls would know what to do. And I mean, if Chas v'Shalom, a guy with a gun came in, and now, many have a telephone somewhere, and many have alarm systems or other things, but until you activate it, until you make sure that the person who knows what to do it is there every week or every day. Our shuls are used every day. So it's a much broader concern, and people have to take it more seriously. This is a phenomenon that is going on, and look in Toronto 3 times in a week. But a global phenomenon to understand that they're targeting synagogues. And we have, thank God, so many and so many Jewish institutions and there are ways to do it that are less expensive, especially use of cameras with locked doors or these detectors that can tell somebody coming in with a clandestine weapon. And there is technology now for a lot of this stuff, and we have to invest in it. It has to be a priority, like everything else that we have, including it's better to pass up Kiddush for a couple of months than to pass up on
Whoa! Excuse me.
Yeah, there are limits. I agree.
Very sensitive topic. We're giving Kiddush.
I'll take it back.
My father's yard site's Monday night. We're giving Kiddush this Shabbos. Can you have chosen a different Friday to mention that, please? But the reality is, and this is what you're emphasizing, is not to stay stagnant. I mean, the reality is that even if you can't create a Fort Knox at a local synagogue, the reality is you can't stay stagnant. You have to constantly address this issue. And as you just said, add a few things, some inexpensive, maybe some expensive, but keep adding and do what you can to protect the congregation. And any public area where people know that major Jewish events take place, right? It's not just synagogues. It's any public area that are known for Jewish events.
For us, the synagogues are everyday events and every Shabbos. But absolutely, every wedding hall, everything, there has to be more serious attention paid to it. And it means locked doors and with somebody to let people in or other credentials or ways. It's be very hard. I can't see at a wedding hall how you're going to check people. Right. But that means then you have whatever metal detection and other things can be done to help.
Right. And like yesterday, frankly, with the right security in place, even at a wedding or major event, with the right security in place, if someone goes ahead and tries to drive into the building, you'd hope that they'd be able to step in the way the security guards did yesterday. All right, we go now back to the war. I don't know if it's fair to call it the greatest fear going into the war, but certainly it was a great concern, and it does worry all of us. I think everybody, not just members of the Jewish community, but all Americans, and that's loss of life in this war against Iran. And of course, yesterday, at least 4 killed in the refueling plane episode. Whatever happened, it's pretty unclear at this point what happened. We don't have any real details other than being told that at least 4 are dead, right, Malcolm?
It is correct. There are 4 dead on the crew on the Stratosphere, this amazing refueling plane, and thank God the other plane made it back to land in Israel. But look, it happens. You can't have hundreds and hundreds of planes in the air, and there aren't technical issues. And thank God it happened over Iraq, so nobody fell in hostile territory.
But you know what we're dealing with here. We are dealing with again, let's be real here. We're dealing with a president who is very concerned about what people say about what he's doing in general, and certainly when it comes to this war. And you see the way he's handling the price of oil situation. I mean, he's trying to be in front of that story all day long, every single day. And now this, of course, is only going to lead to more and more members of the media and more commentators to talk about, America getting out of this thing and why do we go in to begin with. So if, in fact, we want the President of the United States to authorize finishing the job, whatever that means, because at this point I don't think anybody knows what it means, but whatever that means, shouldn't we be, really concerned that he's going to, hear all this criticism and hear these voices and, I don't know, possibly just end the whole thing immediately?
You can't just pull out immediately. There's too much invested to, I think at this point, to just pick up our marbles and go home and say, we've done what we had. Now it's up to the people to do what they want. It is up to the people now to hopefully that they more and more will go to the streets and take action. There have been some demonstrations. It's very restricted. The Basij are out in the streets. Israel the other night sent drones to go after some of them on their motorcycles and in the streets. They're armed. There are 700,000 Basij who are armed by the Iranians, the Iranian regime, to go out and shoot to kill is the order. And we saw in January that they will shoot to kill, and tens of thousands of people paid with their lives, so they don't come out so willingly to demonstrate. They are intimidated. They are afraid. It's understandable. And often those kind of reactions have to come after the conflict dies down, the armed aspects of it. While they're bombing, they don't rally in large numbers in the streets. So there are a lot of factors that will determine when people decide the gig is up. I think at least 2 weeks more, and that the president yesterday's comments, at least last night, were more open towards that. But the problem is that people hang on every word. When he says, we are near the end, we are near the end. And it is true that they were immensely successful in the initial days, but you're talking about a country of 90 million people. You're talking about a vast area with hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars invested in infrastructure, underground, overground, whether it's the missiles, the nuclear program, the drones, the other capacities that they have. We virtually destroyed their Navy, and the Air Force their air capacity was very limited before the war, and it's even more limited now. So there are great successes. War is not won overnight. There's cyber war going on now. There are other kinetic wars that take place.
The drones.
It's very complicated. I mentioned drones already, but these drones are much more sophisticated. They become more capable and harder to detect, although I think Iron Beam is being used, the laser defense system in the north, to take down the drones. We have single days this week when Hezbollah fired 200 rockets. It can overwhelm virtually any system, and thank God that they're taking them down between all of the Iron Dome, Arrow, etc., and Iron Beam have been successful largely taking down, or allow those that are flying into dead space, into open fields and stuff are not, because you got to focus on the ones that pose the greatest danger.
I always wonder what Bibi thinks about public opinion. Do you think he has sort of like the Seder is 2 weeks from Wednesday night? Do you think he sort of has like this artificial deadline to make sure that the population of Israel is not running in and out of shelters during the Seder?
Well, of course, he's concerned about it, but right now it's more than 90% of Israelis back this war. They know that this is existential, the threat to them from Iran. We tend to lose sight of it because of the success in that first day, but the fact is that Iran is still a powerful country. You see what they're doing in the Straits of Hormuz. The whole international community should come together. All of those who have to pay the price for this, for blocking the shipment of oil, which is with 40% going out to the world, and 20% of the West's oil comes through there daily. And I think there are, if they would all cooperate, but you see, even the French, the British, they're very courageous. They say things, they don't do things. And some are against us, like Spain. And I hope people will remember it when they're planning their summer trips and vacations to see this really nefarious activities on the part of the Spanish government and any others who behave similarly. But the kind of enemy that we're up against. It was a whole state. It's a terror state. It's not, a terror entity operating in a state. And their supporters, look how quiet Gaza has become. Look how quiet the Houthis so far, thank God, have been. That could change now. But they still have resources and can post, and they only need one thing, that is to be able to stand up the day after and say, we are here. Whether it's Mushtaba, whether he's alive or not, or wounded or not, that any of them, they can say, we're still here.
The anti-war crowd continues to speculate that even after this war is over, because of the way it's gone down and the way Iran has fought back, et cetera, that they're going to, that the threat of the closing of the straits is never going to go away. Now, I'm wondering, from your perspective, wasn't that always the case over the last 20, 30 years? There was always that threat, or do you think it will be more serious and more regular once this war is over?
No, it's always been there, and they threaten it, and they've exercised it periodically. We've seen it in the Straits of Iran, the Straits of Hormuz. It doesn't take much to do this. It's a very narrow area, so you could with cannons, with rifles even, you can pose a threat. But today they have still the little fast boats, which are very deadly and which can ram a ship, but they also have the capacity still to fire rockets. And the Houthis haven't exercised any of their rockets and capacities yet, and so they can also be dangerous and harassing. I hope that the Gulf states will do stuff to take action and will join in their own defense, because they're paying a price. Look how many rockets, I think 1,500 were aimed at the UAE, more than at Israel. And the damage that they did in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, let alone UAE, Oman this week got hit very hard. I mean, countries that did not play a role, were not supporters of Israel, were not part of the Abraham Accords. So you see the true nature of this regime, that they're going after any country that has an American presence or support systems. They try to target the communications capacities that the U.S. uses to coordinate its flights. And the countries, most of them, are ridiculous in their response. There's hardly anything that's done. There have been some rockets fired by some of the Gulf countries. I'm not going to go into that, but it's a very limited response. Just as we've seen the aircraft carrier coming from France and one from Britain, and the president rightly said, "You come at the end, you come now."
Right.
And they're the ones who have a lot at stake. They targeted a British base in Cyprus.
Uh-huh.
They have other presidents. They targeted the French base in Iraq, and people were wounded there. So they have an interest in this. The region was British and France are responsible for this situation because they carved it up after World War I, creating artificial states and creating circumstances that we're paying the price for now.
It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio. Around the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and of course the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein with us, talking about the weekly update. So Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke yesterday, and some analysts interpreted his words as giving up on regime change in Iran. Has Netanyahu, and to a degree, parenthetically, Trump, given up on regime change in Iran?
No, I don't think anybody has given up on that as being an ultimate goal. It wasn't the initial goal. The first was to get the nuclear program, the missile program, to hit their defense and offensive capabilities. The regime change was never spoken about because it's hard for democracies to do that. And there are laws actually about regime change.
America and Israel can get out of this war now without regime change?
I do not believe that they can wrap this up without a regime change, meaning that there isn't somebody there. And it's very hard to find it. They're looking all the time, but not just them. The people of Iran are looking also, trying to identify somebody. People have said Musavi, who's under house arrest. Even Larjani's name has come up, which I think is ridiculous because he's part of the regime. But you never know. Of course, Reza Pahlavi's name, the son of the Shah, but there's a lot of opposition, and he lives outside the country, and he'll be a figurehead. He'll be involved, perhaps. There are coalitions being formed of representatives of different regimes. There even were conferences, some held, some were postponed, but where, let's say, the Druze and the Kurds and the Ahwaz and the Baluchis and the 30 million Azeris, they make up half the country. So people are talking about a federal system, that would be a more peaceful outcome and solution to this. But the fact that the Mushtaba, we don't know his condition. We believe he's wounded. We don't know for sure anything yet about him, about his, but he's very hard line. Some say more than his father, and he doesn't enjoy respect amongst many sectors of Iranian leaders that I've spoken to over the years, who are there still. But the fact that he will continue, if he was there to continue afterwards and would emerge as the leader, that would be a major setback to the claims that can be made at the end of this war.
How long can President Trump tolerate the rise in oil prices, and more specifically gasoline prices at the pump that are up almost 30% nationwide?
Well, we're releasing a lot from our strategic reserves. Remember, America is a net exporter. So America, this is not hit as hard. They will raise the prices clearly, and our allies are affected, and our exports are affected. But we have now lifted some of the sanctions on Russia so that they can sell more oil. But, some of this is taking advantage or even anticipatory in terms of raising the prices, because, as you said, America makes enough and can provide enough for our immediate needs. But we have a lot of allies and others to worry about. And of course, the Middle Eastern countries who rely on it, the capacity is still much greater than is being exercised. The OPEC countries can produce much more if they need to. And, we will see the price will settle. It'll be elevated. And then after the war is over, it will go back down again.
Do you think the anti-war crowd in the United States has been relatively quiet or has been somewhat silenced? I'm getting the impression the general media is pro this war. Do you get that same impression or not?
Absolutely not.
Interesting.
I think that the general media, with few exceptions, a lot of the talk radio, others have been supportive. I think much of the media has been negative on this, distorting the reality, the importance of this war, what the threat that Iran posed to our security, and to get Americans to understand how relevant this is. Not a war, as you saw, this campaign to say this is Bibi's war, including by people who formerly were supporters who lost elections or have become now voices. And it's shocking to me that they say it's Bibi's war because of some allusion that Rubio made, who clarified it right away. And the president clarified it and said it was, in fact, he who drove this much more. Israel does not, it's not the tail wagging the dog. And that's one of the attempts to show that we're manipulating, that this is not in America's interest. It is in America's interest. It's in Kuwait's interest. It's in UAE's interest. All of our allies in the region and far beyond the region. Iran posed a global threat, and we know that they have sleeper cells. And I know there's speculation, but for years we have known that they exist. We know that they have killed Americans for the last 47 years. That there's so much evidence about what the importance of this war is, and to pin this all and saying, oh no, it's Bibi who drove the war, it's Israel that drove the war, they're going to attack, they were about to attack Israel. Israel is probably more able to defend itself than virtually any of the other countries, and has proven the capacity and the capabilities over and over again. And look at this amazing expression of cooperation between the two militaries. This is unprecedented, and I think will have very long-term consequences that the militaries have become so close and cooperate. All these planes sitting in Israel for the first time, and I think that there will be many things that will come out of this that are very positive, including the relationships with many of these Arab countries that see that the only thing they can rely on locally is Israel.
Let's go up north. There's been no evacuation call for northern parts of Israel till this point, correct?
No, there have been periodic alarms and warnings to people, not as sustained as it has been in the last couple of days.
And the only evacuation orders or suggestions that we've seen is when Israel recommends to those in southern Lebanon to leave, correct?
That is correct. And there was a decision made not to evacuate, but to defend. And we put Israel put up 100,000 reservists in the area, plus a lot of capacity, planes and missile defense and rockets, offensive rockets there. They have gone into Lebanon to try and I don't mean just by air, I'm talking about on the ground, to take certain areas and to try to clean out where they know there are these launchers. It's amazing to me how they can still have after all that Israel has done in Lebanon.
Yeah, exactly.
But Nachum, note the reaction in the media where the reporters go in there trying to get people to criticize Israel, criticize Israel for their attacks, and the fact that 1 million people have been moved. They claim, even if it's half that number. And they don't. They attack Hezbollah. They say it's Hezbollah's fault. That they are angry at them. And the president of Lebanon is introducing legislation that would criminalize Hezbollah. Even put out a warrant for the arrest of the leader. Other steps that were never taken before. If they can really find the voice and the capacity to stand up to them, if the Lebanese army would play a greater role in going after the Hezbollah, we could see a new Lebanon emerge out of this as well.
Right, but doesn't the Hezbollah behavior and the Lebanese government's reaction to it show us that they have very limited control over them? Like, isn't it disheartening that all this broke out up north because we really thought the Lebanese government could, in fact, rein in Hezbollah?
I don't think anybody thought that. I mean, certainly nobody, the media did, but nobody on the ground, no Israeli thought that they had the capacity. We know they don't and didn't, and they could have some, and I think the United States would do more to arm them. Remember, Israel, they signed an agreement with the government over the oil areas offshore, and I think the area that Lebanon got so far was dry, but there were things that were arrived at, and these sharing agreements. So, but people, I don't think anybody was deluded to think that the government of Lebanon and its army would stand up to Hezbollah, which was getting all these huge weapons and the huge stockpiles. Think of it, every day they discover more and more places with where weapons, because the Iranians would smuggle it in and paid for it and invested billions and billions of dollars there. And and we're slowly identifying it, stripping it, bombing it, taking out the leaders, taking out some of the commanders. It's a huge undertaking, and while Lebanon is not a big country, it's not Iran, which is 10 times the population alone has 10 times the population of Israel, and many times the size of Israel. Lebanon is a much more condensed and right along Israel's border, but identifying where they hide in the mountains, where they hide in the cities, and to try to limit civilian casualties as much as possible. But the reaction of the people to me is when I hear BBC reporters and others trying to cajole them into saying hostile things against Israel, right, and they end up criticizing Hezbollah.
The irony is that the Israeli army and the Israeli presence up north may outlast the war in Iran, by God knows how long. I mean, that would be terrible. Look, both scenarios would be terrible. A long war in Iran would be terrible, but also, nobody expected, or I shouldn't say nobody expected, everybody was hoping that Hezbollah would not start up this time, and it's that presence on the northern border that, might lead to Israel being in there militarily, God knows for how long, how many weeks and months ahead.
Well, they have a presence, but I think if Iran is really defeated and it doesn't have the ability to resupply and we can strengthen the Lebanese government. But I worry about Syria, frankly, mostly because of Turkey's aspirations. And I worry that after we finish with Iran and the Shiite ring of fire, we're going to find a Sunni ring of fire led by Iran and Turkey. Turkey is very aggressive. It's much larger. It has a real air force and is trying to encroach more and more in Syria. And of course, Shara beholden to him, and and they also have the Houthis. They have access to Libya. There would be other Egypt. We see a strong Muslim Brotherhood presence, and even in Saudi Arabia and other places where Turkey and the Turkic countries could play a destabilizing role as well. So it's not a panacea to the problems, but if we can knock out this one, then we can focus much more seriously on the others.
And it's that and it's that aspiration that Turkey has that makes it hopeless to think that there's a future Turkey-Israel relationship, right? They can't.
Erdogan is an extremist.
Right.
I know him well. I've met with him many, many, many times, and actually, the Jewish community in Turkey has been defended, but the radicalization of the population, the Islamization, has been taking place for many years, and Erdogan is ideologically Muslim Brotherhood, and he's an extremist, and some people say unstable. But President Trump likes him. One of those, anomalies that happen, that he's attracted to certain people, and despite their extremist and irrational views.
He admires their leadership skills, not their leadership qualities, but their leadership skills.
No, he admires strength, and people project images of strength. Even Shara, when he came out, Shara was a terrorist a month before, and maybe still a terrorist. Just because when they put on a suit, it doesn't mean that he's changed fundamentally. Mm-hmm. Right now, the situation in Syria, thank God, is quiet. But Turkey is increasing its pressure all the time and wants to increase its presence. We'll see if Shara is up to the test and where he really lies. If you look at the areas under the control, you see the Islamization increasing in those areas. But those are things that we'll focus on later. But right now, Israel is protecting the Druze from pressure, even coming sometimes from American sources, and the Druze and the Kurds, two of the primary constituencies. You saw the attack on Azerbaijan, an ally of Israel as well, and the threat to do stuff there. Remember, 30 million Azeris in Iran is much more than the number of Azeris in Azerbaijan, and they can be the bellwether for toppling the regime or creating a new regime afterwards.
Right. It's interesting. The midterms are less than 8 months away, and normally you'd think a president, especially one like Trump, all he's concerned about is the makeup of the House and Senate after the beginning of November, and once the election's over. And the reality is, I guess there's so many millions of news cycles between now and then that he hasn't panicked yet. He hasn't, at least that's the way it seems to me. Because if
he's been remarkable that he's not fallen victim to that. I think that he sustains this. But I think he knows that once the war's over, the oil will come down quickly, I think, because there is more than enough oil. There was a glut before the war.
I know, but he has so many people out there telling him that this war is going to go on for much longer than he thinks, or he really is control of starting it and begin. If he wants it to stop immediately, to stop immediately.
Well, he had many people, including in his own White House, who urged him not to do the war, and yet he made up his own mind. And I think that is, we have to show our courage. We have to show appreciation to the American forces, but also to the commander-in-chief, who's the president, who made the decision and is taking responsibility for it. He's not saying, it's the others. I had to do it did it just to protect, the pressure from Israel when they made the accusation. Right. He repudiated it. So absolutely, we have to show appreciation, and that the fact that he's been steadfast and put the resources necessary, and it also reestablishes the credibility of the United States. What they did, those two air forces, U.S. and Israel together, and the message of this cooperation, I think this will have a lasting impact. The militaries have become very close and see what can be done, and Israel doesn't shirk responsibility. Israel's out there every day and the front line. It's something people forget, because America's presence is so big.
Unbelievable. You like my millions of news cycle line?
There will be, but look at the media, the distortions, the misrepresentations, the attempts to try to portray it without talking about the true history of what is going on, and that the Iranian people want this regime, and the only reason
we don't hear more from them is because they're being suppressed. Unlike January,
but when they do interviews with them, and the people say something, they try to to ask them questions in such a way that they will be critical of the United States, and they're not. They're critical of the government of Iran and saying, we want them out. Look what they did. They killed tens of thousands of Iranians just a month ago.
And they can't and they can't get thousands or tens of thousands in the street because they'd be suppressed and they'd be, God knows, arrested or worse.
You can't do it while they're still bombing. That's number one.
Right.
And number two, the Basij are out, as I said, and they armed 700,000 of them.
Right.
And the people don't have weapons. You can't, civilians, others are not allowed to own weapons, and they do have a suppressive regime. But I think that the right circumstance will see them back out again because this is their future. They know it, and they paid a heavy price for it.
What happened on the Rubio? He did make it to Israel this week, right? The Secretary of State or not?
No.
He wasn't in Israel this week?
I don't think so.
Wow. Maybe I dreamt it.
I maybe did. I didn't pay attention to it.
Maybe I dreamt it.
He was supposed to go right after, at the beginning of the war. And military who are having meetings. But I don't think anybody's flying in and out. It's not so easy, as you know.
Yeah, could say that again.
You get seats on planes for people you want to, as I know as well. But
wow, here's the story. Rubio canceled his trip to Israel early next week following the U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran. This was 5 days ago, according to the State Department. All right, there you go. Here's another one. Yeah, Rubio will no longer visit Israel on Monday. All right. So I was a little bit behind the times in terms of the timing, but at least I didn't dream the fact that he's actually supposed to go. But all right, there you go.
But part of that is part of the deception, the incredible things. People don't know how many things. They make people, the guys and the pilots and everybody, park away from the thing. I couldn't drive to work that morning, that Saturday morning, because we know that the Chinese, for instance, have satellites which monitor all of these things. So they had to create as many deceptive moves, even to the degree of where people could order pizza from, around Washington and there, because you had that pizza monitor system where they could tell. There were so many little details that were taken into account about how to make sure that they didn't tip them off. They moved planes to the south of Israel because they wanted to launch from the north, which they did launch from the north, but they were focused on the south in trying to monitor it. So a lot of things were done, and there were what they did in terms of these drone hits against the Basij is a remarkable feat technologically, close to the pagers and incident. So there'll be a lot of books written on this war, a lot.
Pesach deadline, right? No way it's ending next week. Pesach deadline. Basically.
Well, first of all, they have to have the guys make the shmur matzah, and they need to get it back in the bakeries. But people want to be home for it, and there are also remarkable things being done by groups. My friend Mati Frieden, you see the Sada Marpa, these Hasidim out there every night, middle of the night, 4 a.m., 3 a.m., feeding the pilots, and how these guys express their gratitude, Karza Tov, to them for what they're doing literally every night. There are a lot of groups who are a bunch of taken these kind of getting things, but people should be careful when you just see an ad online. Does not mean it's legitimate. Don't just throw money. Check where you're giving to and give to established and legitimate places.
Yeah, but unfortunately, and I acknowledge this, those Haredim are not the ones getting the publicity, frankly.
Yes, that's true. But a lot of soldiers, I've seen videos that they did dancing with them, thanking them.
Oh, I agree 100%.
It's hard for the Army, to serve 24 hours a day. They do provide them with food, but the pilots coming back, and you have hundreds literally in the air at a time. We have this week again 200 planes up in a single night, and the Americans had a couple hundred planes up.
Right.
This is and the fact that they coordinated so amazingly in the air, to be flying over Tehran at the same time. Right. You can't do this haphazardly.
Understood. All right, Malcolm, thank you so much. Have a wonderful Shabbos. We'll speak, please, God, next week.
Okay, be well. Have a good Shabbos. Be safe.
Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. We call it the weekly update here at JM and the AM.